The Cloverfield Paradox is the third film in the Cloverfield universe, and it's supposed to tie the other films that came before it together. Earth is going through an energy crisis and is on the brink of war, and a group of the most uncharismatic people you've ever seen get sent on a mission to a space station that's orbiting Earth in order to harness a renewable energy source. But they inadvertently open up a rift that collides their dimension with an alternate dimension. And that sounds like a good setup, quite an interesting premise for a good film, but it's not. No. I knew absolutely nothing about this film before watching it. I didn't even know it existed. All that I knew was it was taking place in the Cloverfield universe and that it was supposed to tie the films that came before it together. And the premise alone excited me because I was thinking of all the possibilities that an alternate dimension could bring and all the weird shit that it could do. So I was a little bit excited to watch it. I enjoyed the previous films that came before it, but this is honestly some of the most lazy writing I've seen, I think. Everybody talks in exposition, and whenever someone opens the mouth, it is just to like vomit out a lot of exposition. It's just so unnecessary. The first thing we hear is a news report that explains everything that's going on in the world, and 5 minutes later we get another news report where some guy in the space station is just sitting there watching this guy explain things, just explain the plot, just say, oh, the thing they're doing up there could cause a rift, and that could open up another dimension, and all this bad shit could happen. It's just like, well, that's not going to come back later, is it? Obviously, you know, that's pretty subtle writing there. So whenever someone says anything, it's just some really sloppy exposition. So the dialogue more or less only exists to service the plot and try to move things forward. So we literally learn nothing about these characters. They're just in a situation and things happen. They kind of talk in a really vague sense, so that someone will say something really vague and then another character will have to ask what they mean, so they have to explain it. So it'll be something like, oh, but you remember what happened last time? And someone will be like, oh, what happened last time? Do you remember what he said? Oh, what did he say? And who's he? Aside from having absolutely no chemistry at all, these characters are also painfully underdeveloped. They just feel like stock characters. As soon as you're introduced to any of them, they just say exactly what that kind of character would say. So, say Chris O'Dowd's character, he's the comic relief because he's not funny in this film. He makes a joke or says something humorous straight away. So, oh, he's the comic relief. And there's a bald guy called Monk who talks about religion. So, he's the religious one. And then there's a woman speaking Chinese, so she's the Asian one. I mean, it's just really kind of those trite stereotypes. The main character is given a bit of a backstory, but it kind of just all boils down to she had some kids back on Earth and an energy cell caught fire and burnt a house down, and her husband doesn't want her to go to space. That's the most characterization we get in this film, and it's really lazy. It never really gets explained why these are the only people who can do this job and nobody else can do it. We're just relying on these people. That's it. Just forget about it. And they constantly make reference to the fact that 8 billion people's lives are at stake and they have to do this mission, but it's not sold very well. Like, they just seem like a bunch of idiots who have no idea what they're doing, and they never talk about anything. They never explain anything other than the plot. So there's a part where one of them literally says, I'm a scientist, or something like that. And it's just like, in case you forgot that these idiots are supposed to be scientists. Anyway, because the characters are so thinly written, when shit does start going down and shit starts getting spooky on the ship, you just don't care. I mean, why would you care about anything that happens to these characters when you know nothing about them? And with a premise this good, they also do nothing with it as well. The premise suggests that, you know, spooky stuff's going to start happening when they enter this other dimension, but I think the spookiest thing that happens is like some guy's arm gets sucked off by a wall and then somebody's full of worms or something. I don't know. It just feels like, I think with a premise like this, you need to go full crazy. You need to go full batshit. Like, I want to see someone bleeding milk or someone with arseholes for eyes, but not this tame nonsense. I mean, or in this dimension, my eye twitches a little bit. The film keeps cutting back to Earth as well to follow the main character's husband and watch him talk on the phone and drive in his car for a bit. Literally every time it cuts to him, he's just talking to somebody on the phone and driving in his car. And then he goes somewhere and finds a girl, picks her up, and then he does more driving. So we're cutting away from the slightly interesting shit that's happening on the ship, the spooky nonsense, back to this guy who is literally doing absolutely nothing. I mean, the cast does an okay job considering the script is awful. I mean, I can't imagine it being very easy to deliver really ham-fisted, ridiculous exposition believably. I mean, I imagine that's very hard. So considering that, they do an okay job, but if you have a shit script, you're gonna have a shit film, and this is a shit film. But not only that, it looks terrible as well. All of the shots are really overly lit, so it doesn't look filmic. It looks really televisual. It looks like a TV film. They're not dynamic looking. It just doesn't look nice. I mean, if the film wasn't bad enough anyway, they try and shoehorn in some bullshit at the end to try and put it in a framework of a Cloverfield film to tie in with the universe. But it doesn't. It does what Alien Covenant did and kind of undermines the original by trying to explain it, but that's what made it so entertaining and so interesting. Same with the first Alien and same with the first Cloverfield. The reason it's so scary and so mysterious is because you know nothing about these monsters. You know nothing about where they came from. It's kind of hinted at in both films, but that's what makes it more intriguing. So when you try and explain that, it just kind of ruins it. So stop. So I mean, watch it if you fancy wasting your time on a subpar sci-fi film. I mean, it's on Netflix, so it's basically free, but you could watch dozens of other much better sci-fi films they have on there, so I don't know.